All right, welcome to this week's webinar. Today we're going to be looking at robot programming, both on the EV3 and on the Spike Prime, because both are legal this year and we're in that transitionary period. So we want to make sure we cover as many use cases as we can. I'm Drew. I am one of the program delivery partners for First Lego League Challenge and Explore here in Alabama. Joining me is also Jamie McClung, our first senior mentor.
Sorry, I muted because the dog was barking.
For what we have planned for tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about the tools we use, both the bricks and what programming tools we use. And then Jamie's going to give us a better look at some of the specific things you can do with the blocks and how they work. We're going to try to get that covered. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get that up and running. There we go. Share screen, desktop 3. Okay, so there are two. Actually, I'm going to unshare my screen because I'm going to hold up some things. There are two tools that most teams will be using in First Lego League Challenge. Teams that have been around a while will probably be using the Lego Mindstorms EV3. It comes in a box like this, and it looks like this. If you've participated before last year, this is probably what you have. And if you haven't made the switch to the new tools, this is probably what you have. It's got a screen on it, and when you power it on with the main button, let's see if mine has power. Mine does have power, so it boots up. You'll see Mindstorms here to let you know that it's powering on. And it usually takes a little while to boot up. While it's booting up, I will say a few more things about it. You can connect it to a computer via Bluetooth. However, for the EV3, and Jamie, you can chime in on this too, I generally recommend against using the Bluetooth on the EV3.
Yeah, in most cases, yes. The EV3 is so difficult to get it. It's very finicky. If it works, it's great. But if it doesn't work, you could spend 30 minutes of your time trying to get it to work.
So the EV3 does support Bluetooth, but I would recommend just avoiding the Bluetooth as much as you can. You can't even use your Bluetooth that effectively in a competition area anyway. It uses just a mini USB cable that comes with it. You just plug into the port here labeled PC, and it just pops in. And then the other end is a standard USB, and you just plug that into your computer. So this is the way I would recommend when you're programming the EV3, is to just hook it up with a USB cable. Jamie, anything you want to add on the brick?
No, just when you think about building your robot, don't forget that you're probably going to need to plug in your USB cable. So don't block up all your ports and block that little box, because that's happened before to teams of mine. They rebuild the whole thing, and then you can't get your cable in there very easily, and you're going to have that cable going in and out 100 million times. So it's important to get easy access to it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, the lettered ports are for your motors on the EV3.
Yes. Yep. Those are your kind of your outputs, and then your 1, 2, 3, 4s are your sensors. And that's your inputs.
Now on mine, I've got the rechargeable pack plugged in, but you can also just have a bunch of batteries in here. Mine's the removable rechargeable pack. So that is the EV3. We also, the newer model, and this is the recommended product going forward. So if you've not purchased a set yet, the set we recommend, and that will be the tool going forward, is the Lego Spike Prime. It comes in the yellow container like this. And I've got mine attached to a robot already, but this is what the brick looks like. It is yellow on the bottom, white on the top. You'll notice there's a lot less happening here. It's got 6 ports. There's 3 on this side and 3 on this side. They're labeled A, B, C, D, E, F. And one big difference from the EV3 is that you can plug a motor or a sensor into any of these ports. There is also one port on, if this is where the bottom is, then this is the top. This is where you could plug in a different cable. So you could hook it up to a computer like that. Now, unlike the EV3, the Spike has really good Bluetooth. I have never had a Bluetooth issue with it. Jamie, what about you?
That would be absolutely true. It functions way better. But again, remember at competitions, you won't at the table, you won't be able to have Bluetooth on. You need to have it turned off. You shouldn't have a computer there at the competition table. You might have it at your practice table or the setup practice tables we have, or at your pit. But even then, you got to worry about other people having Bluetooth and kids forgetting which robot switch and logging into your robot and maybe wiping out code and not realizing what's going on. So there it becomes. I don't recommend it at competition time.
The cable will always be the safer bet.
Yep.
Turn this one on. You just push the big button right here. It'll flash. And it boots up a lot faster than the EV3, I've noticed. Jamie can see the color sensor reflecting off my face. It'll give you a little heart. And then there's these little two buttons right here. You can toggle back and forth. 0 is a program. So if you have 3 programs on here, you'll see 0, 1, 2. I didn't show it on the EV3, but I'll go ahead and fire that back up so we can see it. And when you find the program you want, you just push this button again, and it starts running that program. You push it again to stop, and then you just push this button to turn your Bluetooth on, and it'll start flashing like that. To turn it off, you just hold the power button, and then let go, and it goes off. Now on the EV3, which is still not done booting, I think it might have just finished. Yep. You can see your programs here, and you can toggle back and forth on the menu, go up and down if you have more than one, and you press the center button to select, and you press this button to stop the program, and you also press that button to power it off.
One key part about the menus that Drew just showed you, the first menu on the left is your recently played files. So let's say, for instance, that you've been working on a program and you ran it and you wanted to now go back and change something. You bring it back to computer, upload a program and change it. That change that you made does not run if you play recently played again. It will only play the last program that was run. So you got to go to the folder icon, which is the second tab, find your program and run it from there after every change that you make. Otherwise, your changes are not being made and you're not seeing those when you run your robot. I've had kids sit there for 10, 15 minutes and say, nothing's happening, nothing's changing. And now I can say, you're not running it from the right tab. And I know what's happening when they say that issue. But that's very important. That's happened many times, especially with new kids.
So I think one of the takeaways here is that the EV3 is definitely riskier. Not so much that there's anything wrong with it. There's just more chances for a mistake to happen than there is with the Spike. The Spike is much simpler, much more straightforward. But the EV3 and the Spike can all do about the same things.
I think the Spike is definitely smoother in the way that it drives, and the motors have a lot better gear rotations. They can drive faster and still have torque. I mean, it's the newer product, and they definitely improved on the EV3. So.
But as always, the best brick is the one you have available and the one you know how to use. So if you have the EV3 is the right choice. If you have the Spike is the right choice. If you don't have either, definitely go with the Spike, but the EV3 is here in competition, and it's here as long as teams have it. Jamie, anything you want to add on the hardware right here at this point?
The Spike also has an internal gyro, so it's built into the robot. If you've dealt with the gyro sensor on the EV3, it can be very problematic. The gyro on the Spike is much more reliable, and I would say probably the sensors are a little bit more reliable just in general. Like I said, everything was improved with the new robot with Spike.
I think this is the gyro, right, Jamie?
Yes, that is.
Okay, so yeah, so this is the gyro for the EV3, and you have to use up one of your ports here on the EV3 to use it. Whereas the Spike, the gyro is actually built into it, like Jamie was saying, so I don't have to use up one of my ports for that. So that is another difference.
Also, the Spike Prime comes with those blue wheels that you see, and those are kind of molded onto the plastic, so you don't have nearly the EV3s have a tire that goes on a hub that you can take on and off. Those tires wear after overtime, and they also get air. It's not, these are molded on, so there's not like the give that is in the EV3 tires. We don't do a lot of off-road driving in EV3 with the Lego League competition. So that little extra no air inside that tire becomes a problem when you're trying to drive and move. And it's nice to have the hard surface tires.
But if you have pieces of one, because these are all Lego products, they are all interchangeable, interworkable. So if you have Spike wheels and an EV3, you can absolutely do that. If you have EV3 wheels and a Spike, you can do that too.
And the last thing I would say was the little balls that they're used for pivots. So an EV3, it has a metal ball bearing and the plastic inside there. And then the Spike has a white, I would say, I forget what the name of that material is, but it's very hard and rolls. But in both of those cases, no, I think it was like I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. It's a different type of.
It is not metal.
Yes, it's not metal. It's a hard plastic of some kind. But both of those will move, but you got to keep in mind that those inside of that thing is kind of like your mouse. If you've ever had a ball mouse or remember those ball mouses, they get clogged up with gunk and dirt. And so you got to make sure you clean those out periodically because it will start changing and affecting things. If that ball is not moving very well, your robot's not going to move very well.
So now we talked a little bit about the bricks. Let's talk about what we do to program the bricks. Now, when you start up the EV3 classroom software, this is what you're greeted with. There's a few tabs here. We're going to talk about what we see here, and then we'll look at the Spike tool. So this is again for the EV3, and you can tell because there's an EV3 right here, and up in my corner it says EV3 classroom. You'll see a lot on this page, but if I just go to start, it gives me a few little tips here. Hello world, motor sensors, get moving. Also gives me a link to some teacher prep. I can click on this and it'll tell me, how to get going with my set. This is especially helpful if it's a new set, but I'll go ahead and skip that. I can go to units, and this will give me links to curriculum from Lego. One important one to look at is the robot trainer, because a lot of these lessons were made for First Lego League Challenge. Now, if you do this in the EV3 classroom, here at the bottom, you'll see this thing called guided mission. This is the guided mission for First Lego League Challenge replay, which was last season's game. So if you have this set and are looking for some extra practice, this will walk you through kind of how to do this particular mission. Because the EV3 is not the future of First Lego League and the future of Lego, they're not going to be making these curricular materials for the EV3 anymore, but the old ones are still in place. All these other lessons, absolutely fine, perfect. They're going to be something you can work with. But the guided mission is not going to be this year's mission because they don't make the new materials for the EV3. But if I were to click on one of these, it's actually going to have a little curriculum over here that I can walk through and tell me what to do and even give me some blocks. So that's something nice to have. Jamie, you want to say anything about these unit plans?
No, those are great things to do if you're in the off season too. There's a lot of different types of builds and things that are in robots. So there's a lot of different things you can learn just by building the different types of robots that you may want to use in another time. And there's a lot of fun ways. It used to be they had a giant elephant, and so that was always cool to build the giant elephant. And so it's a great, especially if you're in the off season and you want them just to get better and learning about different things. These build pages have great. I mean, you can kind of turn them loose and let them work independently, and they just work through their those lessons, and then they get to program it. And I mean, it's a great place to learn.
And I'll add, this is good for more than just programming. It's good for kind of how to build these robots. What are some things like this lesson here is all about turning, which is a huge thing your robot's going to have to be able to do. Also on your units, so if I click on Robot Trainer, there's also teacher resources. This will actually take me, I can say I'm a teacher. This will take me to Lego's website with even more materials. So this is definitely a great tool to have. Build is going to have a lot of building instructions. These are also usually available online. And then you go to My Projects, which is a history of kind of all the projects you've made. And then if you click on the cogwheel, that takes you to your settings. There's not a whole lot in here that I think as a teacher I'd be worried about. Jamie, do you have anything to add on these pages?
No, not so much inside those. Just those tutorials and units are a great place to get some practice.
And so if you want to create a new project, there's this great new project button right here that you can click on, and that'll bring you to the canvas. I'm going to stop right here on the EV3. We'll come back to it, and we'll get to the same place on the Spike Prime. Now in the Spike app, you're greeted with this. That's because there are two Spike solutions. The Spike Prime, which we've been talking about, this larger brick, is the tool, the solution for First LEGO League Challenge. We also have the Spike Essential, which you'll see is a much smaller brick. It's the solution for First LEGO League Explore. But one of the cool things here is that you use the same tool to program them. So if you've got your younger students working in First LEGO League Explore, they get too old, they go to First LEGO League Challenge, they're using the exact same tool to program their Legos as before. So it's a really nice thing that I'm really glad LEGO has offered us this year. So I'll click Spike Prime because I'm going to be using a Spike Prime. And if at any time you want to change to the Spike Essential, you can. You just change back over and now you're on Spike Essential. Make sure you're on Spike Prime. Just like before, you've got a similar layout. Now it's more vertically oriented. When we go to start, we get a lot of the same getting started. So if I go to the light matrix, it's going to tell me how to do some very basic things with my Spike Prime. How to get the light matrix to work, how to get a motor to work, how to get the color sensor to work, and all these other sensors. One thing that you'll notice if you are going back and forth between the EV3 and the Spike is some terminology gets changed. For example, both the EV3 and the Spike have the color sensor. The Spike has a distance sensor, but the EV3 has, Jamie, what is the EV3 sensor called?
A sonar sensor, ultrasonic sensor.
It's the ultrasonic sensor. The EV3 has what's called a touch sensor, but the Spike doesn't have the touch sensor. It has the force sensor. And they both have a gyro, but again, for the Spike, the gyro is built in. But these little lessons will take you through and kind of show you a little bit how to use these sensors. So very useful for new beginners, both teachers and students. We also have unit plans. So there's a whole bunch of unit plans in here, just like we saw the units on the EV3. I've already got one downloaded, and it is called Competition Ready, and it is the First LEGO League unit. You can download all of these as many as you want. Definitely make sure you have this one downloaded because this one also takes you through all of the lessons for kind of getting started and building robots. And the difference with the Spike and the EV3 being the Spike actually has the guided mission for this year. Now, if you're using the EV3, you might be able to use these lessons. It's just not going to be a really good one-to-one. So you yourself, you'll have to be comfortable as the teacher with both the EV3 and the Spike and be able to make that translation. Jamie, anything you want to add at this point?
No, again, this is just a great learning tool. If you don't know where to start with the robot game, start here. You're going to get the chance to build a robot. They'll learn step-by-step instructions on building a robot, and then it gets into sensors, it gets into objects. I think the last one in the list there was even like building an advanced robot. or well, there may have been before there, but there was one that was a advanced robot. So that gets you even preparing you for being able to make attachments and stuff. So this is just a great place to learn.
And just like before, we do have a link to teacher resources. Yes, I am over 18. And it takes me to the same lesson plan kind of stuff that I saw for the EV3. So tons of resources through this app. We go to build, there are these same building instructions. So this is just how to put these bricks together. We have my projects, which shows you all your projects. If I go to help, I can get the help again. Settings, general, the only things in here I would recommend are to know where the delete all unit plans buttons is. This is an important one to know from like one year to the next, because there was an issue this year where the new mission, guided mission for the new challenge season was not uploaded. And I had to delete all my unit plans and re-download them to get that. But that's the only big setting right here I'd be worried about. Anything else there, Jamie?
Nope, that pretty much gets it. So.
Yep. And so also you can add a new project. Now, one thing that's different with the Spike is there are multiple ways to program your robot. For new teams, I strongly recommend word blocks. Word blocks are the standard way to go. And word blocks are going to match what we do in the EV3. If you have some really advanced students who they know how to program, they're bored with blocks, the Spike Prime also offers Python as an option. The other option are these icon blocks. The icon blocks have no words on them, and they're kind of designed for that transition from I was doing FL Explorer, I know how to use these little blocks, and I want to do it on the bigger brick. The icon blocks are good for that. But for newbies starting out, word blocks are where you want to go, and we'll give it a name. I'll just call it demo and say create, and I'm given the exact same canvas as before, with some differences that are specific to the different bricks. One thing to note is that once you pick icon blocks, word blocks, or Python, you can't change that for a project, but you can create other projects. Jamie, anything you want to add here?
Nope, no, that's pretty good. It's gotten a lot easier with this new software.
So you'll notice both softwares look very similar, but there are some differences that are specific to the different bricks. So I'm going to minimize the Spike, and Jamie, do you want to talk about the different drawers here in the palette?
And on the sides,
yeah,
I would inside this. I have definitely got a lot more familiarity with the EV3. That's still what I've talked with, and we've started swapping the Spike Prime, so I don't quite have as much, but pretty much everything's kind of color coded. If inside the different blocks, I'm trying to get both of them open where I can see one and talk about it. So in the EV3, you got blue. That's just kind of where you can assign things to a single motor. So you can like count your degrees. That's one of the very important parts down here. I'm not sure if Drew's going in it, but you can kind of see where they kind of connect like Lego, like puzzle pieces. So if you have a little puzzle piece looking thing, it means it can connect to one of the blocks above it. And if it's all round, like the bottom of the motors where it's got A degrees counted, that means it can be put into as a value or a parameter in there. Drew probably give you the right terms as I get through there. And then for each one, then movement, you move into actually moving the robot with both motors. You can change your display to different things and play sounds. It's a great place to have some fun. You get into your events. So there's not only just like hit the button when you press it, when make your robot go when you press the button. You can make your robot go when you see red, or you can make it go when you press the touch sensor. Lots of different options about how you make the robot make an event. If this event happens, then this happens. You got all your control, which is your loops and your conditionals. And sensors, this is where you find all the code that relates to all your different sensors.
Dave, I'm going to back you up for just a second, and we're going to talk a little bit more about control just briefly. When James talking about loops and conditions, the loops are the blocks that let you run the same piece of code over and over, whereas the conditionals are saying, based on this condition, do one thing or do something different. But yeah, so then going back to what you were saying next.
Then you get as your sensors, that's where you got a lot of things where you can put your sensors into those the sequence there as like a puzzle block, but then you got a lot of things that are like in a diamond shape or a color shape. So a lot of times you're just reading sensors and putting those into other blocks, which we're going to show and do some examples with. Then you got operators. This is just, if you want to add something to this or subtract, divide, compare it to something, is it less than, greater than, or equal to your operate and ors kind of for something's true or false Boolean kind of stuff. So lots of different, mods for if you want to do even and odds, lots of things, absolute value. That one comes in handy a whole lot.
And I'll also say that that Lego has been really good about the blocks they give you. There are so many different ways to do the same thing that it is very easy for somebody to find what works best for them.
And then as we get the variables where you can create your own variables for things that you want to do, and we'll get to where we get more examples. And then finally my blocks where you can kind of make a procedure off to the side. So we use that a lot for like a line follower, rather than putting in all the code for line follower every single time. You can set up a whole procedure off to the left or right, wherever you want to put it on the program. And every time you drag over that my block, it brings in the whole code for a line follower. So you won't have just huge amounts of code for one program. And so Spike Prime is very similar to that, I would say.
I think the difference, the only real difference on like the top level is instead of display, we have light because we have all these LEDs and we don't really have a screen. But otherwise, your basic canvas should be the same. Jamie, do you have others?
I think most everything's kind of the same. It's just in a little bit different place. Like he said, the display is it's not display, it's a light, because it's kind of like based off lights on the top of the EV3. You can have some different blocks that you'll see inside the same, but on the left hand side is pretty much all the same, but you may see some differences inside the blocks inside that you see inside there. Spike Prime has a little bit better, I don't know, icons. It's a little bit bigger to look at, but most of the stuff's gonna, instead of saying on EV3 it says moving forward, on Spike Prime it has an arrow instead of to tell you a direction. So
now,
just a little
one
bit
thing I will point out is if you look at the two movements, you'll notice, hey, the EV3 has way more movement blocks, but the Spike is newer. That's because the Spike down in this bottom corner, you click on it, there are these extensions. Every team will probably want to turn on more motors, more movement, and more sensors. These give you the more, what I guess Lego considers the more advanced blocks. When you're doing data analysis later, line graph might be useful, but you definitely want the more motors, more movement, more sensors, because now I see, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 11 movement bricks in the EV3 and 8 in the Spike. But if I come down here, there's another 9 in the Spike. So that more movement kind of shores up the difference.
And I would say you're probably going to want those for different situations. So it would be helpful to have those. So do you want me to start going through blocks that are in there, or did you have a plan for some of the?
I did not have a specific plan in mind. If you wanted to go through some examples or commonly used blocks that you see.
All right. So let's just, motors we'll get to later, but motors is pretty much where you're going to use your independent motors, not your drive motors. These will be your motors that are using for different actions. So you have four motors that you can have in First Lego League. So 2 of those motors are pretty much going to be used up to be able to drive with. And then
I'm going to correct you real quick. I believe we can only use 3 motors in Lego League.
Did that change? Because
I'm gonna double check. I'm gonna pull up the rules. I don't want us to
Unless that changed and I missed it, it's always been 4.
I thought it had always been 3.
Because you got A, B, C, D. And you could always
Right,
fill
right.
out.
But I think I'm gonna just pull up the rules and we're gonna get the official ruling. Uh,
If I'm right, I'm doing a dance.
you are correct. It is no more than 4.
Yes. I was thinking, yeah, I've got a long time. I think it's 4.
I don't know why I thought it was 3, but yes, 4 motors.
4 motors. So your other 2 motors that are not drive motors, you're pretty much that's where you're going to hang out in the blue section for motors. And just inside there, you got like the very top one will probably be one of the best ones. I would suggest using rotations. If you have 3 different choices between rotations, degrees, and seconds. Seconds can give you a lot of things that will happen and change with time as your battery dies, and if it catches on something. Seconds can be very problematic. Rotations uses the internal motor sensor, so it's counting like how many times the tire is rotated all the way around. So that can be the same thing as 360 degrees. But let's say if you want to move across the whole table, what is that in degrees? 7,000, 8,000 something degree. It's very difficult just to work in those degrees. But rotations, you can say one rotation is one rotation of the whole tire, and those can be decimal, they can be negatives. So that rotations works a lot easier to be able to keep it in your head and plan for. And then you can do backwards and forwards with counterclockwise and clockwise. So those are very good. And I would also just say that, when you're doing the actions, decimals, don't be afraid to just change something 1/10 of a change. I mean, I've even gone to hundreds of a change. So you can go to 1.1 to 1.2, could be the difference of something working and something not working. So don't be afraid to get very minute, and you could go 1.15 if it's not even working at 1.2, for examples. There's also, if you see the start motor, you can just turn it on. So if you got something that you want to turn it on for a certain, just turn it on or turn it off. That one's handy to have. And then if we go to movement, that's kind of the most common things we use that I've used. Movement, you got all kinds, and like I'm in Spike Prime, you can move for a certain distance. So if it's got a motor sensor that's counting the distance. You got inches, rotations, degrees, seconds. So this one's newer than the EV3. And EV3, you only have the 3 choices. So movement in here is counting basis, but I don't know, Drew, if does it know the diameter of your tire to know how you're calculating your inches on that?
That's actually something I've been curious about.
So I'm not sure where it comes up with that. I
was
still kind of.
So there's a brick called set 1 motor rotation 2. Okay. So that tells you that's how the program knows.
Yep. So that's where I haven't used the Spike Prime as much. So, and that one you can fit, you do need to do some calculation to figure out what your diameter of tire is. So how much are you making in one rotation in distance? But it also still has the rotation there. There's also a lot of things as far as you just, you have move right 30, which if you click on the move right, that gives you like 300. It's like a steering wheel. So you can make the robot turn like in a curve. It's called moves, like a move steering. So that's where both wheels are still active and turning, but one wheel is a little bit slower than the other wheel to make the turn. And then you get, and it is going to be in the Spike Prime, is going to be in the more motors blocks, more movement. You get the one that will have there it is at the top of more movement. And I know Drew's hopefully following me. You have a move tank style. So you can power both wheels what you want them to be. So if you make one tire 0 and the other tire whatever, it's going to be a 0 turn motion. So those are your 2.
Hold on, Jamie. I'm not seeing the move tank style.
It's if you go to more movement on the Spike Prime is where in EV3, it's just in the movement. It's that one right there. That's the move tank.
I got you.
Where you can control your 2 different motors. And you got the distance or rotations that you want to turn it, and then what speed you want each tire to turn at. That one can give you the zero turn kind of turn. The other one's kind of like a car. It's going to turn more like a kind of, we don't have differential tires unless you build it in there, but it's going to curve and more like a steering wheel. This one's going to be more like the 0 turn and a tank. That's why I call it tank drive, because one side's going to go opposite of the other. So different ones are needed for different times based off what you want to do. Yeah, of course you can, drive backwards or drive forwards. Inside bore movement, there's also set your movement motors to brake or to hold the position or coast. I'm not familiar what the hold position, that's a new one in Spike Prime, but brake would
So
mean,
yeah, so the so coast is pretty obvious. That means when I come to a stop, let the wheels roll.
doesn't do any braking. It just like whatever momentum it has, it just continues on with that momentum until it stops.
And brake means go on, Jimmy. Yeah, you can.
Brake means the robot's going to stop, and it's going to stop like hard. If you're going at 100% speed and it stops and you got more weight in the front, the back end's going to come up off the table a little bit. It's going to brake wherever it's at. And then I'm not familiar with hold position. That's a new one on Spike Prime.
So hold position is kind of like brake, except it holds it for longer. Brake is more like stop and hold it briefly. Hold position is keep it going even after.
Okay. Then after that, there is one more block I was going to call attention to.
You want to talk about how in the EV3 we use different terms for the brake and coast? Because in the EV3, it's not called brake, it's called hold position, and it's not called coast, it's called float.
That's new. Or, well, I mean, that's new in the EV3 software. In the old EV3 software is brake and coast too. But that would be the same things. You got hold would be your brake basically, and float would mean coast. The other thing I would mention is that you can set motors to certain movement motors. So like in EV3, it's set movement motors to B and C. So a lot of times I've seen this over and over and over again. If they hit drive and it's supposed to be driving forward and only one wheel turns and it does a circle, a lot of times they don't have them plugged up in the right spot, or either this is defaulting to a certain spot, like a certain ports of B and C, or Spike Prime would be, you can it gives you a visual diagram of where they're plugged up at, which one to go to. So it's always important to either set that by programming or see what the program's set to and make sure your cables match what the program has, or make your program match where the robot's plugged up to. It causes a whole lot of problems, especially EV3. I'm not sure how great the Spike Primes are going to hold up with pushing the clips in and out over and over. But a lot of times EV3, after they've been used a lot of time, those cables will start coming a little bit loose, and you'll just see where everything's been working fine, and all of a sudden it just is doing something weird, like it starts turning in a circle or doesn't turn or move at all. A lot of times is just go by there and check and make sure those cables are plugged up. And
the EV3 cables they look like this. They're like little phone jacks almost. So that's kind of why they lose that connectivity.
That's a great place for troubleshooting that comes up. And I'm just talking about some of the problems I've seen. That one is a very, very common one that the kids get so frustrated on, and it makes me look like a genius when I come by and just pushing the cable, saying now it's right. So that one happens a lot. I guess moving on to light.
And before he gets to those sections, I will point out that Jamie did correctly mention that you should not use the blue blocks for your drive motors, but you can. Yes. If you're going to do some really advanced stuff with it, by all means, use the blue blocks to do what you need to do. But 99 times out of 100, especially starting out, you're going to want to use the movement blocks for your driving motors.
And you could use the blue motor blocks to do a zero turn as well, because you just turn one motor on and turn it, and the other one just is dead. So you could do that just as well. It's just, two different ways of doing the same thing. Lights and displays. One of the cool things that you can do about lights and displays is have it show up what program's running. Like in EV3, I would always have them make sure whatever program, they'd just call it a name or something, and we'd make sure that was on top of the display, the program that was running, because that's a great way for them to know if they got the right program or not. So if they run it and it does something different, they can look at the display screen and say, oh, I ran the wrong program, because that's not what this is. So The display is kind of good for just some feedback. And then the Spike Prime's really a whole lot cooler. You can do faces, you can do, I mean, you can do a lot more fun stuff with it. So that's just fun to play with and have those things up there. Same thing for sounds. Sounds could be, you could use it for feedback if something happens, like if you have something's in the way and you start playing a beep, you could back up until the beep goes off, kind of, or let the beep go off when it clears. You could use it for feedback. You can also use it for fun. I know we've had the crab team and played music while they were running on one of theirs. So you could do it for fun. So I'll move on to events. And the cool thing, one of the cool things is like when you press your button, you can use that when program starts, and I press the button, then that's going to run everything that's inside there. One of the cool things that's now with the new software is that the second one down there is when you got when blank is pressed, and let me see, where it is it there in EV3 Spike. It is the little grid pattern with the front of it, and it's got when left button is pressed or when right button's pressed. There are so many different ways, so you could set up your whole program, you can set up all your running missions in one program. So you could have all your my blocks there and everything there. And so when your program starts, you may just have some initialization, like my robot motors are going to be A and B, and I'm going to set everything to be a brake. And then that's all it's going to run when the program starts, but it's still sitting there waiting to go. So let's say the ref says 3, 2, 1, go. And I've got the first program I'm going to run. I set it to be the left button. When I press the left button, it's going to run that first mission. Then I could set up another event block and then say when the right button is pressed, I'm going to run this mission. And where's the other?
While he's looking, I will
when
say
front is up, and
you do have a kind of balanced story about here. With the EV3, you can either have a bunch of different programs that all have names to make it a little bit more obvious which one's which, or you can have one program and rely on these buttons. Whereas with the Spike, you can do the one program and rely on the buttons, or you have to know what program number a different program is. So depending on what works best for you, there's a bunch of different ways to do this. It just depends on what works best for you and your students.
And there's lots of choices in there as far as what you can get the robot to run. So I think that one again is something that you can kind of play with. You could use your color sensor and just have different colored blocks to activate what you want to run. So your color sensor could be sitting at a certain spot, and then you show it a different colored block to make the whole programs go. You could use your force sensor to do that, or your touch sensor in the other program. So lots of different ways to get different programs to run inside the same different missions to run inside the same program, so that you're not having to swap in and out of those situations. That's good if you have a bunch of my blocks there, because then your my blocks can run and you don't have to keep copying that code into different programs. It's all available to that one program.
And just like Jamie was saying, with your movement, make sure you have the right motors selected, like A and B or B and C for your drive motors. When you're doing anything with your sensors, make sure you have your sensors plugged into the right ports, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4, or on the EV3, or A, B, C, D, E, or F on the Spike.
And then the last thing in the events that I was wanting, in the last 3 blocks, you got these parts where I receive message 1, and you got where you can broadcast message 1 and broadcast and wait. These are great. So if I get done with a message, I could have the robot broadcast a message to other programs or other missions sitting there saying, okay, that one's done. We're ready for you to press this button and make this one go. So it's still more options to do. So these are ways for your programs to talk to other. You can also put in there different things, and like saying broadcast this light display to show that mission is done and completed, and so it's ready to move on to the next one. So broadcast is a great way to be able to send information at the end or beginning, or even if you wanted to send information about what's happening during the middle of the mission, like say you're going for a certain distance, and if you see something, broadcast this message, and if you receive this message, then do it. So that would keep it from doing anything until it broadcasts that message. So that could be a way to put in an if then almost to that situation as well through the broadcast program. So maybe it could be like a good faulty error. Like if the robot doesn't make any movements for 10 seconds, broadcast this message of saying, it's gone bad. give a sad face showing that the mission's not working so that they know what's happening. So broadcast can be there's lots of different ways you could use that in there as well.
And Jay, before we get any further, one thing that I like to point out is that it can be very hard to learn how to do this while learning how to build robots. So these tools are actually based on another programming language called Scratch, which is developed out of MIT. And you'll notice these blocks look very similar, and these events look very similar. We even have the same when I receive, broadcast, and all of these similar blocks. So you're not going to have the robot specific blocks, obviously, but if you're trying to get used to, hey, how do I program? How do I use these blocks? Scratch, and if you have older kids, Snap from Berkeley, if I were to just run it, also use these blocks, very, very similar blocks. And so it's a great way to kind of learn how to do the programming with a little animation over here to the side without having to worry about the robot. So if you've got more kids than you have robots, you can say, hey, go learn some Scratch. Hey, go learn some Snap.
There's extensions for the EV3 in Scratch. So you can put in a little EV3 robot and make obstacles and stuff for things to happen. So
yep, there's the Mindstorms EV3 right there. So I could actually have that there, and I have some EV3 blocks. Not a whole lot, but enough to get going. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly the same, but it's, again, a really good learning tool.
So I'm thinking, Drew, at this point, maybe I can go finish out the sensors, but would we be better to kind of just show some example codes of me trying to run something, what that would look like, or which way would you rather proceed?
Let's go ahead and turn it over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen if you want to start sharing yours.
Okay.
I'm going to make sure we get all these links posted, at least on the YouTube video, so that everybody will have access to these.
It's telling me I'm still disabled.
Well, that is pretty rude. Let's see who can share. Okay. Why don't you try now?
That'll work. And I'll go with I'll make it hard on myself. I use a Spike Prime, so I don't know it as well. But most of it's all the same. So let's say that I wanted to just make the robot run in a square as soon as I started. So in that case, so when I first start, let's say I just want to make sure, and these do not always happen. I usually have, I don't know, on the Spike Prime and EV3, we were always kind of set up as B and C. And it was opposite of that. There we go. Swap the opposite. So I kind of always just set a standard. So for all of my teams to be B and C, just because then I knew where to look for the motors. And if they didn't have them there, I knew instantly something was weird. So let's say I set that, and I'm going to move, let's just say I'm going to move forward, and I'm just going to make, rotations, because I kind of know those, and I'm going to make a fairly small square. So I'm going 2 rotations of the tire to move forward. Once I move forward, the next one I got to do would be to move and go opposite of that. So I want to turn, let's say if I'm making a square this way, turn left 90 degrees, and I'm going to make it be, come on.
Now, I do want to point out to our listeners that,
put in my number
these are not degrees, that this is relative powers. So this means that the left motor is going to be spinning at 90 more than whatever the right motor is. So in this case, the left motor would be going, I think, 50 forward, and the right motor would be going 40 backwards, I think. But it's, so don't confuse these for angles. These are just kind of relative strengths that don't necessarily map to angles.
And it is playing. So don't I keep saying degrees because I'm thinking I'm trying to turn 90 degrees, but it, I always get where you kind of start playing with that and figuring out. And so then I'm doing the same. Let's just say I'm gonna keep going. You can type those in. You don't have to always be moving around the cursor. So I got to make a square. So I got two sides, and then I'm just going to duplicate the same thing. So you can, at that point, you can right click and start duplicating some stuff. Notice you can also you can delete blocks that way. You can also drag them off to the side and get rid of them, but you can right click and delete them. Duplicate's very helpful. So this would be like me just starting the robot and hitting a button, drive forward 2 rotations, turn left 2 rotations. So I'm kind of turning that for 2 rotations, which may be too much. You may just have to play with those. It may be too much of maybe turning too much at one time rather than how long it is turning. So maybe I want to back this off to be at 80. And maybe bring this one back up because now it's turning. So these are kind of like, how hard is it going to turn? Like how fast is it going to do it? And rotation is like, how long is it going to keep that up? So kind of think that, and that way is how those lay out. So you could play with both of them and still get where you want to go to. And then, so that would be that. If I wanted to go backwards, I can hit this backward button on this one and keep those going. So that would just be kind of a simple square to make something happen. All right, and let's say I think we talked about it, but if I was just moving backwards, so let's say that I did that, and all I would need to do is just to turn backwards. So if I had a challenge that I'd often do in trainings and stuff, is that we're going to move, let me back that up. We're going to move up until you reach certain distance, we'll say 5 rotations, and then I want you to come backwards 5 rotations. And so the difference would be the next challenge that I would then do if I'm working with you and talking about turns would be, now I want you to go down in those same 5 rotations. This time I want you to turn around and come back, not just back up. So this time I want you to turn around. So in that case, there's lots that you could use the same rotation here to try and make it turn all the way around. You could use the tank drive that I was talking about, and that's generally what I like to use in that situation if I'm trying to, because I don't want to turn. If I turn, I'm going to curve when I'm trying to turn. So I like to make sure I can get a 0 turn. So I would put 0 in one of them, and then I would turn whatever rotations it takes for me to get all the way around. And then I would duplicate that block, put that one down, and I don't need that one, get rid of it. So that would be the difference between going down and backing up versus going down, turning around, and coming back.
Now, one thing I want to point out, I realize Jamie has this on the screen to our new users, is he's got 3 separate sets of blocks here that all start with the play button. You would not want to put this program on your robot as it is. When you do that, you only really want maybe one of these with a play button when program starts. If you have this on your program like this, it's going to try to run all 3 at the same time.
So probably what would be better is to assign these to different buttons to run what I want it to run. And what is the other one? I know there's something else I could pull. It's easy to in front. I don't think that's it. Let's just say I got the force sensor in there to do my third one, and I got it plugged, the sensor's plugged up into A. So when I press that sensor, I'm going to run this one. So when I press my main button on the Spike Prime, and all these 3 programs are active. So depending on what's going to run depends on what I do. If I press the left button, this one's going to go. If I press the right, that one's going to go. If I press A, that one's going to go. And we could set it up where you could have 6 to 7 different programs all out there at the same time. So there's lots of choices to be able to make more of these.
And when you do upload your program, Jamie, can you hover over the bottom corner there on the right where it shows the number? That number is going to show you where on the Spike this program is going to get saved. So if it's 0, or you can swipe through and get 1, 2, 3, and so on. so that you know that which program you have on the brick is which.
And download, so you would download it to your robot because you're not going to have your computer at the competition. So make sure that always has surprised at least one team throughout the season, is that you're not running from your computer. You want to make sure you download it to the robot and be able to run it to the table. While you're there and you have your Spike Prime loaded up and set, you could press play and it will download and run. But don't forget that you got to hit download before you get to competition, because you want to run it off the Spike Prime. No computer is going to be allowed at the competition table.
And if you're using the EV3 software, there's a download button there too. It's probably a little bit more visible, and it looks like a download button.
I think I can swap. Maybe. Do you see the swap, or is it not?
No, I think you've got just the spike.
Yeah, it's just showing the spike. Okay. All right. What else would we want to do? Are we stopping at 7:30? Do we want to stop?
Yeah, I think we can. I think now's probably a good time to stop, and we can take questions and see what we need to go over.
And this one we can always come back and just keep moving along with this if people are interested. I have worksheets. I'll come. I got bunches of robots. I'll come and teach a class, or however you want me to help.
And we'll probably do at least one more session on programming, maybe in later in October, on sensors more than just movement. But we've also got some presentation materials that I'm going to link to in the video that a lot of this is based on.
So I'll give you back the screen.
Jamie's happy to come anywhere.
Yes, I enjoy getting out and meeting teams and students and kids, and there it is. Trying to find the stop share button. That's the fun part of the job, is getting to do that.
Well, the good news is that programming is not the strength of most coaches in this program. It is definitely something you have a lot of people who can share in that with you. But yeah, so we're happy to take any questions you might have at this time and see what we can address now.
Okay. Like I said, my strength is not programming. This is my first year with Lego. I've done Vex IQ. My question is, you said that, and I noticed in my Lego training that the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth did not work, but some of my students, it's been working for them, surprisingly.
Yeah, it's very hit and miss, very inconsistent. Sometimes it works, a lot of the time it doesn't.
So when it doesn't, I just need to have the USB.
Yep.
Yes. And that's not you. That's not the kids. That's just the EV3. I've seen it for the last 5 years. It's like you'll pull your hair out trying to fix one of them, and you just wasted 30 minutes, and it still is no better. But another EV3 may just work every single time.
If you can't make the connection happen within 2 or 3 tries, just plug it in.
Okay.
It is not worth your time, and it is not worth the kids' time to fiddle with the Bluetooth.
Now, some of my students last year, they did Coder Z. So it looks kind of familiar to Coder Z.
Yes,
So
very familiar.
A good transition for them.
And I put that in the chat, Decretia, but whenever you get time or date or time, if you want me to come, I can bring some more robots. We can do just a whole little course. And I mean, in 4 hours, we can get through a whole lot. Or if you got 2 hours, we can get through half of it. Or if you just got an hour, we'll get it introduced and get them going.
Yeah, I got about 45 minutes because that particular class is 7 period and they have a shorter period.
So in that case, we probably would want to, because I teach as well, so we may want to try and do like an after school thing or a weekend or something. Yeah, we could do maybe a day and get pizza and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that'll be nice.
Did you have
and
any
it'd be
other
nice
questions?
to have another maybe meeting, like I said, on programming, because I'm not the best at it. I can do it, but as far as like teaching it, I don't think I'm the best at teaching programming.
it's always as most of us teachers, Drew's not that way. He's got that's his job. For most of us teachers, it's not anything that we've done before, so it's brand new to us. We have to figure it out.
Right.
But it comes with time. I when I first started, I couldn't. I think I spent 3 days trying to get the color sensor to do something and just to follow a line, and now I can do it in 30 seconds. So I've come a long way from the first days that I tried when we were happy just to get the robot to drive forward and come back in the same spot. To now I can use sensors and make it do a lot more than what I ever could.
And those built-in units that we mentioned before in the software are great for you as well as for the students. So if you're wanting to, get some real hands-on practice.
Tell him to give it to you. I'm sorry.
And we didn't mention this, but for those listening, I will point out that all of the EV3 and Spike software can run on Mac, Windows, iPad, Chromebook. So the only issue with running on a tablet would be if you need to make a hard connection, but the Bluetooth works on all those. So it's really you can program these things on just about anything.
So I would make one thing that I've run into or we saw this week is the Chromebook has no way to save it off onto another situation. So if you're using a Chromebook, that Chromebook has the program on it. So if that Chromebook is gone and closes out and loses it, then you don't have access to your program anymore. So I would recommend, if there's any way possible that you have a Windows laptop or a Mac, that you get those just for the safety of being able to back up your programs and keep track of it, and it not just be on a student's Chromebook that they could forget to charge on the day that you needed it. It would be, I would recommend if you have any way to get one, just even if you bring them in, I mean, you kind of need it to back up in there. And then one issue we're working on that did not exist for the EV3, but I thought Lego had fixed this, is that when you compile the code and put it onto the brick, that once that program's on the brick, there's no way to get it back off. You can't come back the way you had before, because it turns it into machine code for whatever is on the Spike and whatever's on the EV3. So if it's downloaded on there, yes, you can get it off, but it's all garbage. There's no way for the software to convert it back. I thought they were trying to fix that, but I'm not sure if it's fixed.
I have not heard anything yet.
So I'm trying to do a little research on that to see if I can find, because at one time, it's all happened to me. We were 4 weeks before competition, or 2 weeks, I don't remember, two, somewhere in that time frame. And the flash drive that had all the programs were backed up. All of them got deleted, and it was all gone. And I tried everything trying to get the programs off the EV3. And
I think I remember you texting me about this when this happened.
It was not a great situation because you can't get the programs back off. So it's important to back it up and save it somewhere. Those are the things you're only going to get if you watch these calls.
Listen to Jamie's life mistakes.
Yes, I've made all the mistakes.
So that you don't have to. Anything else we can answer right now?
Well, it's not related to programming, but can I present my screen?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording since we are wrapped up on programming, and we will get this out. So I'm going to go ahead and just stop the recording.